This is the Stages of the Soul podcast, a production of the Caritas Center. I'm Brian Dolan, and with me is Nancy Kane.
Good to be with you, Brian.
Today we're going to talk about survival mode. And this was inspired because of what you're seeing going around. It's not from necessarily like an obsession with the TV show Survivor, I would guess, right?
Correct. I am not a fan of that Survivor. And I'm not a fan of anything I'm watching other people be under a great amount of stress.
You don't like that?
No.
Why not?
Because then my heart starts racing. I start feeling panic. Years ago, we went to, what was the name of that movie where they're on a bus and the brakes are out?
Oh, was that Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, right?
Yeah.
I could look it up. I don't remember. Somebody knows it.
Yeah, but so the whole movie is about this bus out of control, right?
Yeah.
And I was with our family, and I became so stressed out, I could barely stand it. And so I had to go into the lobby and wait for the rest of the family until they finished.
Good for you for getting up, though. A lot of people would just suffer through it. And
oh yeah, no, I'm not, and that is not an interest of mine. It's like, just no. Like when my heart starts racing and I feel like I'm having trouble catching my breath and I'm over identifying with the movie. No, the same thing with that show about the restaurant in Chicago.
The Bear.
Ray and I tried to watch 2 episodes.
It's a good show.
I'm like, oh golly.
Oh, is the stress of the kitchen chef, I guess, huh?
Yeah, they're yelling at each other, and it's not resolving conflict, and one wants to quit, and yet the business may not make it, and it's like, who would enjoy this?
Yeah, I know it looks miserable, but I guess when you love to cook, it's fun. Sarah and I watched that series. It's a great series, but yeah, it's like, why would you want to be a chef? It seems horrible.
Yeah. Well, my son, who's in the industry, was saying it's pretty accurate.
But he must like that.
Well, he likes it from the sense of that it's accurate. Like, he can see they're playing out what he sees in the industry.
So, but he must not have inherited your, secondhand anxiety, I guess?
Or over-identification. No, he's able to watch it for what it is. And I'm like, Eric, doesn't that stress you out? And he's like, no, it's interesting. I'm like, interesting? No, they're screaming at each other.
Wow. Yeah. I had a good friend who was way into true crime. So they were listening to the true crime podcasts and they were watching the TV shows like Dateline and everything. They had to stop because they were just convinced they were about to be murdered. Oh. You start to turn the lights on and check the locks, and they found them doing all these things. We're like, wait a minute, this is not healthy for me. So they had to stop.
The blinds are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You probably can't do true crime either, can you?
No, no. So Ray really likes the Rock'em Sock'em movies, and we've gotten to a really healthy point in our marriage where I'm like, nothing personal. I will not go to that movie with you, but you enjoy it. Like, you enjoy it, not me.
Isn't that funny? It takes a while to get to that point. Sarah and I used to feel this pressure that if we watched a film, it had to be together, or a show, it had to be together. Yeah. Now we'll find stuff we can handle together, but we're perfectly happy watching things separately. But it's taken over 20 years to do that.
Yeah, and I think I felt like on my end, I felt like I was like it was a lack of support or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
In Ray's mind, it wasn't like, oh, she doesn't love me. She's not wanting to go to this brutal movie with me. But in my mind, it's like, I'm not supporting him, even though I really hate this experience right now.
Yeah, if she really loved me, she'd stay and watch Keanu Reeves stuck on a bus.
Right.
And now, okay, so we're going to talk about survival mode today, and tying to that, I used to have this tradition when I was in radio. By the way, we'll get back to that in a minute. But I would come home and have lunch because I did the early morning shift, and I would watch cable news to just feel like I'm caught up. And after a while, I just stop because I was constantly like, it's all falling apart. What are we going to do? Like, everything was stressful. Everybody's upset. And it kind of ties to what you're talking about, right? Like, you're sensing that from lots of people as you go about your ministry life and your regular life.
Yeah, and I'm seeing, well, my own experience, but I think that there's, we were talking about this earlier. There's panic and there's anxiety. I feel like we're in a cultural panic mode now.
Hmm.
That I would compare it to someone running into a theater. We're all quietly watching the movie, and then screams fire. And the first impulse for everybody is like jumping out of your seat, and people are tumbling over each other because someone said fire, and then they all violently get out, and then the person who screamed fire is no longer there, and they're like, well, wait a second, I thought there was a fire, and it was like, no, there wasn't a fire. And I think that that's really the culture we're in right now, is that there's a lot of screaming fire, and consequently our nervous systems are, when you hear that, it's like, okay, all right, I need to do something, but I don't know what to do, but something's going on, but oh no. And so it sets our whole neurological system into a fight, flight, or freeze response, and we're not operating as we should.
Yeah, I actually saw an article, I think it was in the New York Times, was talking about how like the doomsday business is just booming. So
Mm-hmm.
companies who make, they used to be fallout shelters, but now I don't know what you would call it, but essentially a bunker. They build it in your house and they stock it so you can live in there and shut off from society. There's people getting, there's safe rooms, but it's more than that now. And then there's even this, there was a place in Michigan, they wouldn't say exactly where it is. They literally had built a moat around their home
I'm
that could
cracking
be,
up.
I think, set on fire. I mean, it was like this, they're going to come and get us. And so that industry, from the panic you're talking about, people are making millions off of the panic.
Yeah.
And cable
Yeah.
news is making millions off the panic as well, because this is one of my frustrations, having worked in media for so long, is that American consumers forget that fear and anger is what sells.
Yes.
Like
Right.
if you turn on, let's just say Fox News, CNN, and they're like, "Hey, glad you joined us. Nothing's happening. It's all fine.
It's a beautiful world.
In fact,
It's a beautiful world.
here's a nice story about puppies." Like nobody would watch. Nobody would watch. So
Right.
the way they get people to watch is by scaring them or making them angry. And
Mm-hmm.
when people are scared and angry, they'll watch, because that's just that raw emotion people want to cultivate. And then, of course, that's what advertisers want people to watch. So the way to get money from advertisers is to scare people or make them angry. And it's this vicious cycle. I mean, marketing in general is the same way. You want to make people think they need your product.
Well, and I think here's where the problem comes in. It's one thing to say, yeah, that's what's going on, but to think that we live in a time where most people, I would call it, their brains are activated into a fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So back to that screaming fire in the movie theater, it's all fine and good for a temporary moment. But if the screaming of the fire keeps going, my brain is going to keep firing. And so I don't have a normal reaction then when I get into the car and I'm on the Kennedy Expressway and someone cuts me off, because my brain's already in this hyper alert fight, flight, or freeze. And so I might go to the fight of now I'm screaming at that person because they cut me off. When if, in a normal, calm down, rational state, it'd be like, oh, yeah, they got in front of me. Okay, they must be in a hurry, or they must
Hmm.
have a place to go. Um, and I think this is where we have to be aware of what's going on for ourselves in the culture as well as in our brains, because we have to get in charge of that. I have to be in charge of what I'm watching. I have to be in charge of how is it that I'm in a fight, flight, or freeze response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And if I were to look inward on that description you just had, I think I spent many, many years of my adult life not aware that I was in that zone, fight, flight zone, but I think I was there. To what extent am I just an anomaly? I mean, do you think someone could be living in that but not even realize that they're living in that?
Well, exactly. And I mean, I think of my own life, because when I was composing the email for the people that have been through the program, I was aware that I've been at Moody for 25 years, retired 2021, started the program in 2014. So whatever the math is on that, those years at Moody, I think were primarily lived in an over adrenaline fight, flight, or freeze. I would be in a flight of like, I've got to get this done. And if this doesn't get done, what are the students going to say? And oh no, I'm not prepared for my lecture. And I think I spent most of those years in that mode.
Hmm.
And somehow, by God's mercy, still learning about Him, but it was from a very much of a desperate help way of living. And looking back, my ego was very much driving the show because, again, it was a survival.
And you're a psychologist, and yet you're saying you didn't necessarily say to yourself, I'm in a fight or flight mode. You just were, and it was just normal.
It became normal because the environment I was in, and it's not just Moody, every company, every school has its own pathology, but the environment I was in was very much high performance. So the culture, again, back to the culture panic, the culture was, we expect you not to have a weak point. So your student surveys, your excellence in teaching, are you publishing, are you doing other outside ministry, was all very much of a part of that ethos. So it wasn't just my ego showing up saying I want to be top of the heap. It was more of like, oh my gosh, I've really got to do something here or else I'll fail. And I remember at one point, and I have so many stories of stuff like this happening, but I was rushing to class, gathered my books, had my pen in my hand, had my folder for my notes, rushed to my classroom, and didn't realize that in my hand the pen was open. So I went to scratch my face, and when I went to scratch my face, I drew a line down my
Sorry to laugh at your misfortune, but
and went to class, taught the entire class. No one said a word. I came back, went to the washroom, and I'm like, this gaping line down my face. He must have thought I was disturbed or something, because it was like, why is she drawing on her face? Why is she doing this? But it was stuff like that would keep happening. And looking back, I was over the top in terms of my capacity.
You got to share the one about the airport mirror too. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, that's another one. I mean, I told the students at some point, I said, if you're listening to me, don't think that you're listening to a profound professor. I'm really Lucille Ball in a mask. And they started laughing. I said, no, really. I mean, if I have the chance, I will eat too many chocolates on the assembly line, or I will bump into walls. And the story you're referring to is I was going to a conference and went into the women's washroom and was geared towards getting to my flight on time, running a little bit late. Went to the washroom, came out, didn't realize that there was a floor-to-ceiling mirror just when you walk out the exit of the washroom. So I pick up my case, I pick up my purse, I'm rushing. I don't realize this is a mirror, and I rush headlong into the mirror, face full on, full court, rushing speed into the mirror. I bump into the mirror, and I see someone, right? Because it's a mirror. And so I thought, I bumped into someone, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Because of the force to which I fell into the mirror, dropped my bag and dropped my purse. I'm picking it up, realize I've apologized to myself. And then I look around to see, and has anybody seen me not only come to the mirror, but then apologize to myself? Unfortunately, no one was there. And I got to the fight, settled in. I was like, Lord, what was that about? Like, that was like over the top, imbecile kind of thing. And I heard him very clearly say, you keep bumping into yourself. And I allowed this to happen because I wanted to show you that you keep bumping into yourself.
Wow.
And so it became a lesson for me. But I mean, I could probably spend the rest of our time just telling story upon story of things that I did that the students, I think, came to see. Oh, yeah, that's just Mrs. Gain. Like, she's going to, like, one other story. So when I get focused, I can get really focused. And when I get really focused, I can focus for a long period of time. And so that can be a strength and weakness. I'm in my office. I'm focusing on something. I don't know, it was a lecture or research or whatever. And I hear a knock on my door. And I had learned by that point that I didn't have to answer every knock on the door, that if I'm working on something, I don't have to turn around. People have to know that I'm working, whatever. So the knock comes. I'm thinking, okay, they can see me working. I'm not going to answer it. Knock comes again a few minutes later. I'm like, okay, this is like a persistent student. Thinking, so I kind of waved them off, and I went back to work. A few minutes later, a really stronger knock comes, and I hear this little voice saying, "Mrs. Kane, are you going to come to class today?" I'm like, oh my
You missed
gosh. And
class. Wow.
I opened the door, and almost all the students in the class were standing in the hallway wanting to see if I was going to be coming to class. But that was, again, that fight, flight, or freeze. I was in a focus. I've got to get this done, and then everything else kind of falls away when you're in that hyper zone.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until I was in the Caritas Center's spiritual formation program that I stopped to slow down for a minute and realize that I've been in a hurry my entire life.
Mm. What was that like to realize that?
It was a little disorienting, I think, is the first reaction I'd have, because there's part of me that's like, what am I in a hurry for? Like there's
where am I running to?
Yeah. Like to give an example, we have this little hobby farm, and sometimes I have to walk a long ways back and forth from the garage to get a tool or something. And I'll catch myself like, just going as fast as I can. And I have to stop and go, what are you doing?
Running.
It's no deadline. This is your project. Why are you going so fast? Slow down. Yeah. And I just was always in a hurry. And being in a hurry caused me to do like with the mirror for you. It's just, I was so inwardly focused that I was never in the moment.
Yeah.
Like I never noticed the beautiful stars, and I would miss the entire fall colors because I was just driving. I was looking at the road. Got to get there. Got to hurry. This guy's cut me off. It takes a while to even realize you're stuck in that panic mode. Now, as a caveat though, since you're a licensed professional clinical counselor.
Yeah, almost licensed clinical professional counselor.
I never know where to put the professional part.
It's after the C, so LCPC.
Okay, so yeah, but definitely professional.
Yeah,
I'll emphasize that. So, yeah. Now, anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, is a real disorder, and you're not minimizing somebody who actually has that diagnosis. So, in order to kind of wrap our heads around this, help us understand the difference between panic, this consistent panic we're talking about, and someone who has generalized anxiety disorder.
That's a great question. Panic is, think of it as cultural and external related. So it's something out there that has prompted me. So I watching the news, and I find out there's an earthquake in the Midwest, and it's saying it's this many decibels and it's very serious. And I feel this, my heart starts to race. I start to get nervous. That is panic. Like, I need to do something. Like, I need to check to see where was the earthquake and how close are we, and was anybody hurt, and all that. That is a panic response. A general anxiety disorder is much more far-reaching and is related to people that overall feel never really feel at rest. There's always this kind of hum of fear, of not feeling settled, of feeling hyper alert. So it's not necessarily driven by external factors. It's more of an internal state that they have to constantly manage. And so I find those people are, I call it high pitched. They are super aware of everything, but often when they have that diagnosis, haven't developed the skills yet to be able to learn how to be in their world and calm their body down and calm their mind down so they can be present.
What are some other factors somebody might, like if someone is just panicked from watching too much cable news, they may think they have anxiety. Like, why is that different? Help us understand that a little more.
Well, I think it goes to what you're taking in. I was working on some stuff this afternoon on, back to this survival notion. And I think that People with general anxiety disorder have had a lifelong issue with feeling fearful,
Hmm.
feeling unrest. But I think in our culture now, there's so much triggers of unsafety and potential doom and um, real and made up, that I think that we are moving into a space where we're being conditioned to always be on the alert.
Hmm.
Now you add to that the ego that says, I need to be on the alert, and guess what? I cannot fail. I cannot fail. I cannot lose my job. I cannot not be showing up in my best self. Now you've compounded that feeling of stress.
Hmm.
So back to Moody for me, there was a lot of ego there for me that I had to really I couldn't lose my job. I had to survive. I had to do the best, and I had to be one of those. And the Lord so graciously and so mercifully kept orchestrating circumstances where I literally kept running into the mirror. And he was like, okay, how much do you want to knock yourself out here? Because it's not working.
One of the ones I've gotten in trouble for when it comes to panic over the years is there's a number of Christians in our country who are convinced that there's major persecution happening against followers of Jesus in America.
Mm.
And when I had my radio show, I never would talk about the stories that would get people all wound up. And it would be this, little Billy in Paducah, Kentucky, took his Bible to class, and they threw him out on the street. And see, kids can't even bring their Bibles into class, and they're throwing them in the street because there'd be a story about that, right? Now, what people didn't know well enough to do is to wait it out, because there would be obviously a lawsuit, because you can't do that. It's against the law. And if you played that out, the school district would settle and the kid would get $1 million, because that's not how it works here. We still have
Mm-hmm.
our First Amendment rights. But if I were to be a panic show, I would have just shared that story and never done the follow-up. And
Mm-hmm.
so here's where I would, and at the same time, I would regularly interview people from like Voice of the Martyrs or places like that. And you'd get them on the air and they talk about somebody in India. In fact, no, I remember there was some Christians in Eritrea who were being kept in a shipping container in the desert
Oh my.
for months and months and months.
Wow.
There, you hear about pastors imprisoned in China just for preaching the gospel. And you hear about
Mm-hmm.
all these things, right? And I thought to myself, I wonder what it'd be like if we gathered together all the global church persecuted. And it's like, let's get together with all the persecuted people. And there's an American sitting between an Eritrean and a Chinese Christian. Are you going to nudge them and go, yeah, I know exactly what you're going through. You're in your shipping container, and they won't even say Merry Christmas to me at Walmart, And I just am convinced that it's not as bad as people think. Well, to make a long story short, I would say that on the air, be like, this is ridiculous. We do not have to worry about this. People call in, Brian, there's persecution everywhere in America. People are being persecuted. I go, okay. Have you ever been persecuted for your faith? No, I haven't. Okay, well, what about anybody in your family? Anybody in your family been persecuted? Other than not being told Merry Christmas? No. Okay, so you haven't, and no one you know has been persecuted, but you're convinced we all need to watch out because we're being persecuted? Yes. Like, you couldn't talk to that person.
Right. But see, that again goes to the fight, flight, or freeze. That person is in a fight zone. So back to the fire in the movie theater, you tell someone right after the event occurs and says, "Was there a fire?" And they're like, "That guy, he screamed fire. I mean, for sure. I was sitting there and he screamed fire." But if you say, "But was there an actual fire?" Well, I don't know, but I know that he screamed fire. Because their brain is still, um, it's on. Their brains are on fire, literally.
Yeah, and I hate to laugh because I've been there, but it's so illogical. And you and I, that's kind of how our brains work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can sometimes use logic to talk myself out of this. But if you're talking to somebody who's in a movie theater, it's like, okay, you didn't see a fire. You didn't smell smoke. There's not a fire. So you're okay, right? They should be able to say, yeah, I'm okay. Whew. That was weird, but they
And
don't.
Yeah, and this is where it's important for us to talk about this, because I think that if people can be aware of this fight, flight, or freeze and how problematic it is, and aware of the cues in their own body, your body's always telling you what's going on. So that if they can be aware of, like, yeah, I feel like I got kind of shortness of breath, or my heart started beating really hard, or like I felt kind of like I was going to panic, or that is a cue to say, I'm probably not going to be thinking rationally here.
Hmm.
I'm probably going to be in some kind of zone where the enemy is out there and I have to protect myself. So we're talking about the fight, but the flight and the freeze is, when I perceive something that's threatening, I just want to go away. I just want to hide. I want to, like you were talking about before about the crime scene. I just want to, lock all the doors and avoid everything. Or the freeze is I'm in, like, almost in a coma zone. I'm like, I'm feeling nothing. I don't register anything. They're dissociating.
Now, if I'm going to dig into my psychology mind from taking general psychology in college,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's such a thing as a psychosomatic disorder, right? Where you have physical symptoms with no physiological cause because it's
Mm-hmm.
brain related. Do you think somebody living in this panic mode could actually have some chronic health issues that they're unaware of are caused by this?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Because what do they say? 92 illnesses come from the suppression and repression of anger alone. Illnesses.
What?
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, the clock's back.
Oh,
One
yeah.
one
And
ding.
it's one ding, and it's on the half hour. So, bless you, clock. You're doing good for 105 years
You
old.
did it, clock. If you
Yeah,
don't
you
know, you have
did.
to listen to past episodes. We talk about the clock in detail. Um, but no, so uh, I can give an example of the psychosomatic thing where I learned about the concept and I felt so big time knowing that long word. And then in 2008, my wife and I moved with our three small children to Chicago. I changed careers. We had just had one of the kids was a baby, so we just had a baby. I changed careers and we moved. It's like all the stressors, right? Suddenly, I get all this stomach pain. There's got to be something wrong. I go and I had an endoscopy where they jam the camera down your throat when you're sleeping, of course. I had the barium thing where you drink like radioactive things. They take
Oh,
the X-ray,
fun. Yeah.
and I had this like lingering fear: am I going to show up and the doctor is going to be like, "You're fine. There's nothing wrong, dude." And because I know what a psychosomatic disorder is. Well, all the tests are done. Sit with a doctor. He said, "There's nothing wrong with you."
Ah, you're
And I
like,
was like,
no, tell me there's something wrong.
"No, how do I fix this?" And so I ended up, because of the way I was living my life, with chronic acid reflux, because that's what it was. It was just chronic acid reflux. It was my body just freaking out about all of the stress I was carrying.
Yeah.
And there was no physiological cause to it.
Yeah.
I felt like it was startling because when I learned about psychosomatic disorders, I'm like, well, those poor people, you know,
Yeah. Like, oh, they just can't cope.
yeah. But I think far too many of us don't realize that's the case. But we're really dealing with such high levels of panic in life that we're not well.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
had that recently again. I can share briefly. I recently was laid off from my radio job,
Mm-hmm.
and it was pretty sudden and unexpected. And I, I finished up the work, and then I finally get home the last day, and my body just shut down. I ended up feeling like what was a norovirus. I thought I had, and I won't go into all the detail, but people know what that is, and it was
Mm-hmm.
horrible. But I was aware enough after about 24 hours of it, where my wife looked at me like, "I'm not surprised you feel this way."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh, right. This is a response to the stress. This is not I got a virus, and it's a real thing." And I think it wasn't until I could actually accept that that's the case that I actually began to start feeling better.
So in some ways, your body was registering a super normal response to
Yes.
trauma, but your brain was like, we're not going to go there yet.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
I think that's true. Yeah. Or I didn't even know how to process all of the, fear, stress, anxiety, all those things I was feeling. I think
Mm-hmm.
my body was ahead of my mind and it
Mm-hmm.
just collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And it took, of course, your help as usual for me to get out of that. And I'm still on the journey. It's not complete. It's only been a couple of weeks,
Mm-hmm.
but the Christian life can't be one where, if I truly believe in God's sovereignty, and I do, God knew this was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I allow myself to plunge and spiral into some sort of panic, it's in a sense me not trusting that God is sovereign, and He has mercy for me and grace and care and concern, and He'll care for me. I had to
Yeah.
remind myself of these truths.
Yeah. And eventually did that feel like it settled into your body?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're bringing up a super important point that I think with all what we've been talking about with anxiety and panic and our brains are on fire and stuff, inherent in that is this profound lack of trust in who God is.
Hmm.
That He orders all the events of the world. The world spins by His providence. Everything is providential. Everything is providential. And if everything is providential, and He is good in all His ways, then we can trust Him. But in that moment of panic, our brains and our bodies and our minds are saying, "Nope, nope, 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 nope. Got to take care of myself. Gotta do something. Gotta control something." And I think more than ever, this era of history that seems so chaotic is a profound invitation from God to say, "Will you trust me,
Hmm.
or will you go to control?" Or will you try to figure things out on your own apart from me? Or will you numb yourself? Or will you go deeper into addictions because you don't want to cope with what's going on? I think I was thinking about this the other day, is I think this is a full court press for all of us, not just a few of us. I think it's a full court press for all of us of what do we really believe?
Yes. No, I'm with you 100%. In fact, my radio ministry was based primarily around the concept in Romans 12:2, where that we're supposed to allow God to transform or renew our minds
Mm-hmm,
with His
mm-hmm,
Word. Like
mm-hmm,
that idea that a transformation isn't just agreeing about who Jesus is and what He did for us. It's literally allowing God to transform the way we think
mm-hmm,
and the way we process through things. And so if that's what my entire ministry life is based around, I was thinking to myself, what message would I send to people that I've been telling that
mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm,
years if I plunge into a panic or get angry or get resentful? It's one of those moments where you have to kind of self-examine some self-examination of, do I really believe this? If I truly believe in God's sovereignty, if I truly believe that He is totally in control and He knows what's going to happen, there are consequences to that. It must change how I react to situations. I can't allow myself to get angry and rude and mean. I have to be able, I can experience anger, but I can't sin with it. But I have to go, no, if this is what God wants, I can be sad about it, but I
mm-hmm.
cannot sin in the midst of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I think back on, I was working for an organization where there was one of the vice presidents that was unfairly treated and well respected, but unfairly treated by the um, people that he was reporting to, the president and CEO. And they eventually ended up firing him. And at his farewell party, we were all expecting him, because it was, I won't go into all the details, but like his exit package, and he lost all of his retirement. It was about as cruel as it could be in terms of letting somebody go. And at his retirement gathering, we were all expecting him to be, kind of licking his wounds rightly and saying, yeah, this is hard, but somehow I'm going to get through, or playing the victim. And he actually did the absolute reverse.
Hmm.
He stood up and he thanked everybody that he'd been reporting to for their years of service, for their years of care for him. He thanked the organization for all the things they've done for him. And then he thanked God for allowing this to happen because it's deepening him in his faith and trust. And people started to cry in the room because they were, I think, first shocked, but then like, oh my gosh, this is what a true believer looks like.
That's right. This is what it's supposed to be like. It's not what I expected, which is interesting, but it's how it's supposed to feel. And I think it ought to move people to tears in those moments because Christ is that beautiful and his call for us is that profound.
Right. And I thought this is how we're to live.
Yeah.
And like I said, everybody was kind of ready for this injustice and cruelty and again, it wasn't denying that, but what he was basically saying is, bless you for all of what you've done, because God's teaching me and I'm glad for that.
Now it's hard to do, but at the same time, it's not a complicated teaching in scripture.
No, it's not.
Like Jesus made it so clear, like you love your enemies. And wait, who's my enemy? It's like everyone.
Yeah.
Like if you're, it's anyone. So you're supposed to love everybody. You get it? Love Jesus.
Well, and I think of that famous quote. I'm not going to quote it exactly right, but Solzhenitsyn, who was in prison, unfairly for his journalism and criticism of communism, in prison wrote an article and said that he realized in prison it wasn't the prison cells, that the prison bar that was his oppressor, or the government. It was the line of good and evil men's hearts, and that he could actually then go to a place of saying, bless you, prison cell, for teaching me what was really true.
Oh, wow. And
I think, again, that's a huge paradigm shift, that I really think gratitude is the movement of the soul through all of this. Being able to first recognizing God as sovereign, but two, then saying, can I actually thank God in the midst of this? That something good will happen. It will. Maybe not immediately and maybe not in 6 months, but something good will come. And my job is to wait for the goodness of God and his mercy that the psalmist talks about, that I will see again in the land of the living.
And now, if I took a couple steps back, what I should have said is, your neighbor is everyone, not your enemy is everyone. So in case anyone was freaking out about that, everyone's not your enemy. That's not good theology. But now if we're going to dig into what you were just saying as well, though, it's you're not saying you can't grieve.
Right.
And you're not saying you can't be upset. So how do we balance those two? What does it look like in the Christian life to, for example, I get laid off, I'm angry and I'm sad. I'm not going to just go, well, God works all things together for good, so it's good.
Yeah, the whole head in the sand kind of approach.
Yep.
I think what we see in the model of the psalmist is very much of this crying out to the Lord in injustice, in pain. I mean, the psalmist is very clear of at times saying, I want them to die. I want you to make them suffer. I mean, but consistently you see throughout the Psalms, the ending point of the Psalm is, but you, O Lord, are merciful. But you, O Lord, is good. But you have brought, that one Psalm that I love, that you brought my feet out of the miry clay and set my feet on a rock. So he goes through all these things, but then it consistently ends with the character of God. And I think that we can cry out to God, but we have to make sure that we're crying out. What's that other verse in, I think is Isaiah, are you crying out to me, or are you wailing on your bed? And I think that a lot of times we can get into wailing on our bed. Like, this is awful. This shouldn't happen. I don't want this to happen. I want this to go away. All the while we've lost that connection with Christ of really encountering him and saying, you see me. I want you, I'm asking you to hear me. You do hear me. And in that dialogue, then there's formation. There's a connection of him showing us truth. And allowing him to be for us in that moment that he couldn't be in any other time in our life.
Yeah, and I love those Psalms. I can't believe I wasn't thinking of that earlier, but it's so true. One of my favorite ones from David is when he proclaims, and at the beginning, it's something like, "How long will you forget me, Lord? Forever?"
Yeah,
I read
right.
that. I'm like, this is my guy. And he said it to God, because sometimes we feel that way. But you're right. That pattern of he always acknowledges God's sovereignty at the end.
Yeah,
That's so good.
yeah.
Now somebody could be listening and they're like, oh boy, maybe I am dealing with panic in my life. Maybe
Hmm.
I am caught up in this. How do you unravel that and live differently?
It may sound radical, but I think that I have found for myself that the world continues on even if I'm not watching the news. It's like it's just amazing to me.
Isn't that wild? Who knew?
Yeah. Like, and I think that there's a place for a media fast, television, social media, however you're following, to start to calm your brain down. Um, One of the things that in this high pitched pace that I was living for so many years, I started to really burn out one year. And amazing, I didn't do it every year, but my spiritual director said to me, he said, "You seem really tired." And I said, "I am." And he said, "What I'd like you to do is go find a church that has a cross in front of it and just sit there." He said, "I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to feel like you have to do something, but just sit there." And he said, "You be with Jesus and let Jesus be with you." I was like, it seemed like the most radical, unbelievable thing to do. Because again, I was so pitched up and so stressed and so nervous. And so I took him up on it. I found a church by us that has a beautiful front of the church and a cross. And I just sat there. And first few days, I was very restless. And then I started to cry. There was days where I
Hmm.
was like, emotions started coming up. And every day from like Monday through Friday for close to 6 weeks, I sat there first thing in the morning.
Wow.
And I found, I couldn't tell you exactly when, but towards the end of that 6 weeks, suddenly I felt life coming back into my soul.
Hmm.
And that I had a dialogue now going with God. It was like I knew He was hearing me and I was hearing Him. And it was like I had hope and I could continue on and I could be excited about life again. I could find joy. And so I think to the listeners, I would say start to find what it is that will calm you down so that you can stay focused with Christ. And it for all of us, I think it's a lifestyle issue, but
Yeah.
also in that it's the ego. Where are you over invested in something that God is not asking you to be over invested in? Because we all do it, and I can speak for myself. That was true for me for many of those years in Moody. I was over invested in success. God wasn't over invested in success for me. He wanted me to be faithful.
Yeah, it makes me think of that. The first book you have people read in the Caritas Center's spiritual formation program from Brother Lawrence, Practicing the
Mhm,
Presence of God.
mhm.
His job was what? It was like mopping and peeling potatoes.
Right.
And he's like the happiest man in the whole world.
Yeah, and to think that, so we would look at that and say, well, so what's eternal about that? But to think that the letters that he wrote to someone who was inquiring about the spiritual life became a Christian classic forever. I mean, now we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years later. So it was very much an eternal impact that he had from the simplicity of peeling potatoes and washing floors and delighting in Christ. I mean, that's the call for all of us. I think that's a beautiful picture that you're bringing up.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of a friend of mine now too, who he deals with some chronic health issues. He's recently had some serious health concerns. I've never heard him complain.
Mm.
He is filled with a love for Christ to the point that he also is a guy that he'll be the first one to get emotional thinking of the things God has done and his
Oh,
blessings. And I was just texting with a friend about this guy and how much we love him. And he's just like, I need to be like that. Like we all need to be more like that. And that's kind of what you're talking about is need to be able to, despite our circumstances, whether it's peeling potatoes or a chronic health issue, know that we can practice the presence of God and we can be okay. I can be laid off and not be throwing up in the woods like I was a
mhm.
week ago. I can be okay.
And I think that we're really hitting on the best place to be is in the center of Christ's presence. That is our life. That's the eternal space that God invites us all into, just to learn how to dwell and stay there. And from that, then everything else makes sense. From that, we see his perspective. From that, we see that we can have the fruits of the Spirit in abundance when we're centered in that place with him. But it means to get there, we have to get all those circuits calmed down.
Yeah, and in a practical sense, I hear you saying too, we got to stop doing a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
We fill our time scrolling through social media, where it's not that you have to stop completely, but you could really dial that back a notch. We're watching too much streaming services or whatever. You don't have to stop, but maybe you stop doing so much.
And I think the invitation in that is to be aware. Be aware of what's going on when you're doing social media. Like, do you feel more connected with yourself and with God? Or do you feel more distracted?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you pulled into envy because someone else is posting something that you don't have that you think you should have? Or that awareness is really key. And I really think the first step, like I was on Instagram the other day, and when I was on for probably 20 minutes, and by the end of the 20 minutes, I could find myself being like scattered, like, oh no, there's another cute puppy, and oh, that rug, oh, that's a really good rug, and it's like all the stuff that doesn't really matter.
Well, and then even worse, be like me and be like, why does that guy get to go on vacation? He's always on vacation. I never go on vacation. What's that about? Goodness sakes. It's not a place you want to be. And, I have a long way to journey on this front, but it's something you've helped me with profoundly. And it's going to sound like I did this on purpose, but it's an obvious moment to do a shameless plug for the Caritas Center's spiritual formation program.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of that journey. And if you're struggling to slow down and practice the presence of God, and you feel like you're in a panic all the time, you need help to get that done. And it's not necessarily just counseling. It very well could be spiritual formation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that what we see happen so beautifully in these cohorts is in the context of community, where people see other believers asking the same questions, struggling with the same issues, unique to each life. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Unique to each life, and seeing God move among us. We're also, in addition to that, we'll be posting some stuff on that soon, but we're looking at spiritual transformation intensives, we're calling them. So it's a group of 8 to 10 people in a home setting that will meet for a shorter time, from a Friday morning to a Saturday afternoon. And we'll do the same thing we do in the cohorts, but it's less commitment. It's a smaller community. And again, with the same aim of strengthening believers to really find that place, that sweet spot with Christ that they know that they long for. So that's kind of our next wave of things that will be coming on soon.
And I'd venture to guess a lot of followers of Christ in your region / in the country need help with that, because we're so caught up in this panic and in survival mode that it's really hard to get out of it. It's really hard to get out of it.
It is. And I don't, this is obviously, again, this is not self-promoting. This is everything to do with the character of God. But I just read the papers from the cohort we have going now from their first retreat, and 3 of them who don't know each other said the same thing in the same sentence. They said, if this is the only retreat I ever had, it is worth it in terms of what I've discovered about God.
Wow.
And I think that's why I say it's not self-promoting, because it says everything about how God longs to bring us close. And he longs to love us, and he longs to refresh us, and he longs to bring us by the still waters that we truly can be fed. But there's just so much in the way now. And so we need avenues like this.
The Stages of the Soul podcast has been a production of the Caritas Center for Christian Formation in partnership with Stained Glass Media. Don't forget to subscribe to, rate, and review this podcast to help us spread the word. Nancy Kane is a licensed professional clinical counselor, retired professor, author, and speaker. Brian Dolan is a radio host, podcaster, and former public school teacher. Be sure to check out the Caritas Center's Spiritual Formation Program, as well as more information about this podcast at thecaritascenter.com. That's thecaritascenter.com. And last, but certainly not least, special thanks to the man, the myth, and the legend, Ray Kane, for his guidance, support, and expertise. Talk to you next time.
This is a Stained Glass Media production.